Trice, he is the man accused of kidnapping and killing 2-year-old Wynter Smith and also of stabbing her mother, is scheduled to appear in a federal court tomorrow.
The case, which has garnered national headlines, comes with the possibility of the death penalty if Trice is convicted.
Joining us tonight to discuss the case is former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, Matthew Schneider, on Zoom.
Thank you for being with us tonight, Matthew.
Thank you for having me back.
So let's get right into this. Michigan is one of the 3 states to never execute someone after joining the union, and the death penalty here is on the table, and it's against the state constitution. So how is this even possible?
It's possible because this is a federal case. And of course, in the federal system, there is a death penalty, and it is used mainly in the southern states, but it can also be in Michigan. And that is not without some great hurdles. This just isn't a case that can be brought and decided by the local U.S. attorney. The attorney general himself, Merrick Garland, will have to personally decide whether or not the death penalty will be utilized in this case. And then it would be up to a jury to decide whether or not the defendant has committed these crimes and his punishment is worthy of the death penalty.
Not to sound insensitive to it, but we know that, unfortunately, murders and things happen every day. What about this case elevates it to a death penalty level?
There are factors on both sides that, by federal law, will have to be considered. On the elevation for the aggravating factors, you just look at this beautiful, young, innocent girl who did absolutely nothing wrong and was allegedly strangled with a phone cord in a very heinous, terrible manner. That's what prosecutors will be looking at. They'll be looking at the nature of the crime. They'll be looking at the defendant's criminal history, the things he's done in the past. And then his defense team will be providing all kinds of information about the defendant's childhood, his upbringing, his mental health or his lack of mental health for what are called mitigating factors. And they'll be arguing that the death penalty shouldn't be imposed if it gets to that stage because of all of those factors, going back to the time when he was a very little young man.
Trying to understand what here makes this, though, a federal case, what the difference is here.
Yeah, it's a good question. Normally, a kidnapping or a murder is a state case. It can also be brought federally if the prosecutors choose to do so, as long as they satisfy certain things related to interstate commerce. And in this case, the prosecutors are saying when the defendant got into that car, which was made in Canada, and drove it on an interstate highway, that connects the case to interstate commerce. And there could be additional things we find out in the future here about whether or not he was texting or using calls that might have crossed interstate boundaries. Those are the types of things that the prosecution has to show in order to make this a federal case. And if they can't show those things, it is not a federal case.
If they do show those things and this does become a death penalty case, how likely is it that that would even happen in Michigan, that he would be put to death?
It's very unlikely. This changes between administrations. Typically in the Republican administrations, that they have been more pro-death penalty. The Biden administration, in fact, has imposed a moratorium, an ending to the death penalty in federal cases. So that hurdle right there, it's not just about Michigan not being a state that has a culture of having the death penalty. The administration that's in place right now has the same. And I think it's very unlikely that a death penalty will be sought in this case. Anything's possible. But if we know anything from past administrations and the statements of Attorney General Merrick Garland, it seems unlikely in this case.
So how does the Justice Department decide whether or not to try a federal death penalty case?
It's very complex because the prosecutor, the local U.S. attorney, will make a recommendation. It then goes to a committee in Washington, D.C. of attorneys. At that stage, even the defense attorney gets involved and they ask for the defense attorney's position. That's not done in any other case where the defense is actually brought into the room as to that decision. Only after that, it will go to the attorney general. And I can tell you, having been involved in death penalty type cases and death penalty cases themselves, this process from the time of indictment to the trial, to the conviction, to the appeal, it's at least 10 years for all of that to play out.
And if it goes to court and well, excuse me, we know that it's going to court, but is there a chance that he can maybe plead down and take the death penalty off the table?
It is against Justice Department policy to try to use the death penalty to bring in a lower charge. That the Justice Department can't do that. But if that's not their motivation, if they're not doing that, remember, we've only seen a complaint. We haven't seen the indictment yet. If they don't do that, that would be possible. But that seems unlikely here because they've already charged in a complaint a death-eligible offense. It seems very likely that we're going to see the same thing in an indictment.
Well, Matthew Schneider, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, thank you so much for being with us here tonight and discussing this very difficult case involving Wynter Cole Smith, who was strangled with a cell phone cord allegedly by Rashad Trice. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.